great to have you all joining us in the audience today and, of course, on the live stream as well. Now, many of you are leaders or managers of your respective organisations. And while your industries may differ, I'm sure there's one thing that many of you would agree upon, which is that you're always looking for better, faster and smarter ways of doing things. And having the right data can go a long way in helping you achieve that. So then what happens when you add artificial intelligence to the mix? Well, lucky for you, Scott Brown is from Experian, which is a world leader in data and technology, and we're going to talk just about that. Scott, great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining me.
So Scott, we've been talking about AI for the last 10 years, and there's a lot of big statements around it. It's overrated, it's underrated, it's going to create jobs, it's going to take everyone's jobs. You get the gist. What are your thoughts about where we are on the AI journey and the opportunities that might lie ahead?
Yeah, so we've been talking about AI, I think, since Skynet. And so when you compare it to that, I guess we're a little bit behind, which is a good thing. But we're very early days in terms of the AI journey. In terms of your question, I think the answer is yes to most all of those questions you posed. Is it underrated? Yes. Is it overrated in a way? Sometimes. It's hard to have a discussion without talking about AI. So in a ways, it can be overhyped a bit as well. But can it drive cost savings? Absolutely. If you're using AI, and particularly some of the technology that's used to operate the AI, can it drive a ton of cost increases? Absolutely as well. And so really, I think the application of AI, using it responsibly and using it the right way, is really the trick that I think we're trying to work through in our financial services industry. And I think most of the attendees in the audience here are working through across their industries as well. I think the way I think about AI is almost like the rise of the internet in the 90s. If you think back to that, can you imagine ignoring the rise of the internet back in the 90s? Yeah. And if you think today, the 20 minutes of uninterrupted time that I have today, where I won't be on the internet, is probably in this discussion here. And so to just chalk AI up as hype and to not take it as transformative for your industry is obviously a mistake. I think that we are, in a way, in the early days of the internet here, where it's a little bit unknown, unproven. Regulation is still getting formulated. And so, but I think the bright side is, I think many leaders here and across different industries are really leaning into the opportunities with AI to transform their businesses and to help everyday consumers.
Okay, so let's talk about the transformative nature of AI, but more specifically when it comes to financial services. Tell me about how AI and technology is playing a role when it comes to your business, and in particular the impact that you're seeing firsthand that it's having an impact on your clients.
Sure. So Experian works with a variety of different companies across every industry. And so the audience that's here in the room and on the webcast, I think it would be hard to find a company that we don't actually work with in a meaningful way. And so we have a very broad purview. When it comes to financial services specifically, we really sit at the intersection as not only the largest credit bureau in the world, but one of the largest independent data companies in the world as well. And so we're really working a lot with large banks, credit unions, fintechs, community banks, international financial services companies. And so we really get an interesting purview into this as sort of an independent data provider across those different constituents. And what we find is that, first of all, I start with the technology itself. Yeah. The financial services industry has experienced a significant amount of disruption and change in the last 10 to 15 years. Yeah. Just as a consumer, if you think about the way that you pay for merchandise during point-of-sale transactions in a retail environment, that's very different now than it was even 10, 15 years ago, where now you can use your phone, your Apple Watch, think about the way you send money to friends. That was a thought off into the future, a decade plus ago. You think about the consumer and the user experience. When you use different apps in your everyday life, it's actually hard to find something that doesn't have finance embedded in the app, even if it's not a financial services app to begin with. So I start the discussion thinking about, it's hard to find industries in the last decade in particular that have been impacted as much by the advancements in technology as financial services. But I'd also say there's a long way to go. So, we work with a lot of the largest banks in the world, and they have made significant progress in terms of catching up with some of the tech companies that have introduced a lot of this disruption. But I think we would all agree that there's a long way to go. Yeah. And one of the things that we work a lot with our clients is not just working on the technology transformation that I've been talking about, but also how do you use data responsibly with these high-powered tools that we now have at our disposal, with both cloud computing and AI coming together. Right. And we really think that leveraging data more inclusively along with those tools allows you to get a better view of the consumer, which is really what all banks and lending institutions are trying to do.
So Scott, give me a specific example. In terms of how, you mentioned some great things of how you're working with your clients. For the audience here today, can you put this in tangible terms? Give me an example of a customer that you've worked with and how you've helped them.
Yeah, sure. So if you think about extending a line of credit or extending a loan, whether it's a consumer loan, small business, or for capital liquidity, ultimately the lender is looking at whoever they're extending that loan to almost through a keyhole. And they have limited information about the individual or about the business that they're looking to extend credit to and provide a loan to. And so what we're really spending a lot of time on is how do we expand the keyhole? And how do we do that by looking really at two main questions that all banks and lenders are looking to answer in a more complex world is, one, how do I confirm you are who you say you are? Mm-hmm. So with all of these advancements in tech and in AI, I think privacy, but specifically fraud, is becoming a greater challenge and concern. So we look at that in terms of fighting good with good, and that means with better data. The second is really about how do you actually make a decision about extending a line of credit and to what extent to a given lendee. And ultimately, what we're looking to do is to expand that keyhole again by leveraging more data, by giving more data to the lending community so that they can leverage that for a more holistic view of a consumer, of a small business, of a big enterprise that's looking for capital and liquidity. That was always the goal within our industry, but now with the advancements in some of the technology that has to underpin how those decisions are made, how risk is weighed, how fraud is verified, the opportunities are really accelerating now.
So when we talk about data and AI, there's a couple of different ways that they're impacting the financial services industry, and particularly when it comes to Experian, there's two perspectives. One is the business side, and of course how you help overcome financial challenges, but the other is the consumer side. And one of the things is about how AI and data analytics is overcoming financial inequality for B2C. So talk to me about both those elements and how it works for businesses and consumers.
Yeah, so businesses are trying to do some of the things that I was just mentioning, specifically around having a much more integrated user experience first and foremost. Yeah. So if you are extending a line of credit to a given consumer, how do you do so in a way that's integrated into their everyday lives? And that's where the concept of embedded finance comes in. And how do you embed finance into a consumer's life, not the other way around? Yeah. And then the way in which our lenders think about balancing risk and optimizing their P&L while also expanding the keyhole to be able to reach more consumers is really built off the back of greater analytics on more data enabled by more cloud computing. So that's on the B2B side. On the consumer side, this is really where Experian's mission is really focused, is around financial inclusion, because it's a real problem in the US and in many countries where just so many everyday people are actually locked out of the financial system and are not able to get basic credit. Right. One data point behind that is that in the US alone, there's over 100 million consumers who do not have access to mainstream credit.
100 million, wow.
100 million, and so that may not be something that you and I think about every day, but it's really amazing to think that a third of the country just doesn't have access to mainstream credit. So, getting a mortgage, getting that loan for a new car, opening a small business with capital that you need is just currently not easy or not even a reality for a good chunk of the US population. And then when you extend that to a global purview, I mean, there's billions of people who are locked out of their respective financial systems that have to continue to transform to bring more people in, because I think that our role at Experian and our role within the financial services industry is to really make this better for everyday people so that they can pursue their dreams. Yeah. And one of the ways that we're doing that, and many of our clients are doing that, is looking to really expand the universe much more by bringing in new data sets that may not have been historically included in these types of decisions, so that financial institutions can still make risk-based decisions on extending liquidity and extending credit, but also are doing so to a subset of the population that they just can't even access today, even if they wanted to.
Scott, I know you've got a bit of a personal example when it comes to this issue of financial inclusion, because I think when you talk about 100 million people, people just assume, oh, that's got to be people that are low income or that don't have the same opportunities. But that's not the case at all. Can you tell us how this has hit a bit close to home for you in terms of the issue of financial inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm married to a Chinese American immigrant, and she and her family are successful. My mother-in-law is a doctor. Father-in-law is a successful engineer. And when I met them about 15 years ago, and they were looking to buy a home, they had to buy it in cash. They had no options on the table to get a mortgage, even though they each had respective careers that were very successful, had great income, very responsible with their finances. At the end of the day, they couldn't get a mortgage. They couldn't get a loan for a car. And so it was really shocking to me at the time. It wasn't something I had spent a ton of time thinking about growing up in the US. So I think that immigrant community in particular is one that hits home for many of us, I know, in the audience here that live in the US and in other places as well. But even you think about recent graduates, if you don't have any credit history, it's still very difficult to get onboarded into the US financial system. And when you think about most of your life events, right, it revolves around this concept of having access to fair and equitable credit. And that's, I think, a big problem in the US and many other countries that Experian is looking to help with. A couple of years ago, we launched a product called Experian Go, actually, which is really aimed at onboarding people into the financial system that don't have a credit history or any credit background. Right. I wish that was in place 15 years ago when they moved here and when we were trying to get them set up, but I'm glad that there's something out there now that addresses the problem.
Scott, it would be remiss not to talk about the risks of AI when it comes to the industry in particular. What's your perspective on how you mitigate against AI risks in the financial services industries and what they are? We're running a bit short on time, so quick.
Yeah, so with AI, there's definite risks that we have to work through, both in our industry and in many others. I think it starts with transparency and explainability, which are not new concepts in financial services. If you're going to extend a line of credit to someone, if you're going to deny them, you have to have an understanding of why that decision was made, because you're impacting people's lives and this has real implications. And so I think a real focus on the data that goes into the models and the data that comes out of the AI, I think, is really important. And having a high amount of documentation along the way is really, really important. And I think it's hard to talk about this without touching on regulation. Yeah. I think we're supportive of regulation of AI, obviously, particularly in financial services. But it has to be the right AI. And it has to regulation around AI, because we can definitely create some challenges if we're not careful. So ultimately, I think it's about getting the right business leaders together with the right policymakers so that we can find solutions that protect the consumer first and foremost, but also allow us to drive the results we're looking to deliver.
Okay, so now looking ahead, my last question to you, cast yourself, look into your proverbial crystal ball. What are some of the major trends you see when it comes to financial services that's related to data and technology and that you really see as future trends that are here to stay that are going to have a big impact on the industry?
Yeah, so with the advancements of data and AI in particular, there's one trend that is really picking up speed in the US. It actually started overseas in Europe and in other countries and is now coming to the US more, and that's called open banking. And what that really is this concept where consumers can contribute their data in exchange for better products from financial institutions. So Dell, if you were to, as an example, sign up for Experian's Boost product, you can contribute some of your transaction history to us, and then in return, we can deliver you a better improved credit score, assuming that you're up to date with your bills and everything like that. And that concept is extending beyond that example and is really extending to core lending. And so if I were to look into the crystal ball for, over the next 5-7 years, I think traditional lending methodology and processes will not be replaced. They will be augmented by consumers connecting to banks via APIs, contributing their data that they're comfortable with for the bank to have access to, and the bank using that in conjunction with all of their historical credit data to make better decisions and hopefully offer them new and better products that they didn't have access to before. So I think in the future, the convergence of data, tech, AI really leads to more financial inclusion and a more modern way of underwriting across the board.
Either way, it's here to stay.
Absolutely.
Scott Brown, thank you so much for your time. Great talking to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.